You know, the things that the Democrats can do. Number one, Democrats can end the filibuster and then pass legislation that actually puts America back together. And if Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema are standing in the way of ending the filibuster, Chuck Schumer needs to either step up and do some bullying of his own, or probably more ideally use some carrots. There are things they want. There are things that Joe Manchin wants. There are things that Kyrsten Sinema wants that Chuck Schumer can give them. I mean, this is, you know, Lyndon Johnson was the master of this. And if Schumer can't whip his caucus, if he can't get those senators, all of them, completely in line with either ending the filibuster or, frankly, I think what might even be better. I've written several op-eds on this. You can find them at HartmannReport.com. Where you simply say, yeah, as long as you've got 40 members on the floor and somebody is talking, we will suspend activity of the Senate. But the minute you stop talking, or the minute you drop below 40 people on the floor, the filibuster is over and we're going to hold a vote. I call it the Jimmy Stewart filibuster. So come on, Chuck, you can pull this off. You can do this. So that's step one, number one. Number two, the Supreme Court. We had a caller about this yesterday. I wrote an entire book about this, the hidden history of the Supreme Court, the betrayal of America. Back in the 1980s, when John Roberts worked for Ronald Reagan, John Roberts wrote this long memo. Let me back it up a little bit. Reagan hired Roberts with one specific job. The Republican Party had come to power, and there was outrage among the Republican base about two Supreme Court decisions. The 1954 Brown versus Board decision that integrated public schools, and the 1973 Roe v. Wade decision that struck down state laws against abortion all across the United States and gave women the legal right to have an abortion. The Republican base was furious about these things. Reagan wanted them overturned, but they were Supreme Court decisions. So he hires this lawyer, this young guy named John Roberts, and gives him an office in the Justice Department and says, okay, you have a year, figure out how can we overturn these decisions. And Roberts goes back and looks at the Constitution and reads the Federalist Papers and reads all of John Adams' James Madison's writings from the Constitutional Convention, the diaries of the Constitutional Convention, and Jefferson's rants about the Supreme Court, all of which is in my book on the Supreme Court. And he comes back and he says, you know, he writes this long memo, and I reprint actually parts of that memo in the book. He comes back and he says, you know, the Constitution says in Article 3, Section 2, that Congress can pass a law saying that the Supreme Court can't rule on something. So why don't you just pass a law saying abortion, you know, states can make abortion illegal if they want, and states can practice segregation if they want, and append to the end of that law a sentence that says this may not be reviewed, this is not subject to judicial review, this may not be reviewed by the Supreme Court. That was John Roberts' recommendation to Reagan. The problem that Reagan had was through the entire 8 years of his presidency, the Democrats controlled the House of Representatives, so he could never get that legislation through. Well, right now, Democrats control both the House and the Senate. Let's pass some good old-fashioned court-stripping legislation. If you're not going to change the court, if you're not going to expand the court, which is another power, by the way, that Congress has. Congress can regulate the Supreme Court, and they can define exceptions to the power of the Supreme Court. Now, you know, Biden has put together this commission, but to look at the Supreme Court and the entire federal judiciary. Problem is, he's got a bunch of Republicans on his commission who are Federalist Society members. Nothing good is going to come out of it, just like nothing good will come out of a January 6th commission. Why? Because it's, quote, bipartisan. So instead, how about passing some legislation that says, you know, just straight up and straightforward, the Supreme Court, we are passing the For the People Act, We are giving every citizen of the United States the right to vote and to vote easily. And the Supreme Court may not review this law. It is not subject to judicial review. That's my suggestion. Okay, there's a couple of things. There's a couple of really big sticks that Democrats have. And then, of course, you know, the one that we talked about in the previous hour of using a special prosecutor instead of a commission to look into what happened on January 6th. Because there were crimes that set up the crimes.